Hi, I'm Owen Casey Stevens, and this is the Aftergame. I will be your host this evening. Normally, my wife, LJ Stevens, will be co-hosting, but sadly, as you all can see, she is not sitting behind me tonight, so I will be going solo. As a result of me going solo, I'm going to be putting a whole bunch of links in the comment section now in advance while we're waiting for people to show up, and I will periodically be looking down at my computer and typing. So, with no LJ, this will be a little more awkward. Please bear with me. I'm going to start with a link to last week's After Game, which was part 1 of this. The whole reason that we have a part 1 and a part 2 is that I got cut off from the story last week by bad internet. So if I simply go away, that is, again, just a bad internet connection. So that is part 1. I also have a Patreon where you can, if you want, pay me money on a very small, ongoing monthly basis. It's very much appreciated. And it supports things like me taking the time to do these videos, amongst other things. Again, since LJ won't be around this week, I'm going to have to be looking at the comments myself, so I'm not ignoring you. I'm just overwhelmed and potentially missing you, which is subtly different from ignoring you, which requires me to be aware that you are asking me a question and decide to do nothing, as opposed to having no idea. I've also got a blog. I've got a lot of content on my blog. I update my blog normally a couple times a week. It may be less during con season, or if I am, for example, flying to Grand Rapids, Michigan to go to Grand Con, as is happening as of time of broadcast this week. So those are sort of some basic links of things that are likely to get mentioned and come up. Last week I also mentioned Rogue Genius. And I don't know if we actually put up the drive-through page for Rogue Genius Games, but I am one of the owners of Rogue Genius Games. I am the publisher, and we have tons of stuff from a lot of really smart people, most of which can be bought on Drive-Thru RPG. So I am at least trying to get a link to that to put up, and then we will get into the actual event for the evening. So as I said, this is part 2. Part 1 was last week, and the topic is game industry standards or lack thereof. And last week, we successfully covered some information on contracts, what work for hire means, what that means for the rights of your material, pay rates, let's see, profit sharing as opposed to pay rates, the open game license, although only in brief, it wasn't in depth, that's probably a different show. What the editing and development of turnovers tends to be like, what's going to happen to your words after you turn them over, feedback or lack thereof that you're going to get from people, and I'll hope to touch on that just a little more this week. And let me say that when I'm talking about the game industry, I'm specifically talking about the tabletop game industry, and for the most part, the writing and development end of it, a little bit publishing, because those are my areas of expertise. So some of this applies, for instance, to art, or editing or layout, but a lot of it doesn't, because those are not the areas I mostly engage with. So if you have specific questions about those things, I'm happy to try and address them. We will just see how the evening goes. I've got a couple of comments. Alan Hoffman says, thanks for all the contributions you've made to TTRPGs. You do great work. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Okay. We also, last week, covered editing and third-party publishers. And I was in the midst of explaining kill fees. So kill fees are normally worked into contracts, and what a kill fee is it says if you do work on this project and the project is never published, if it dies, if we cancel it, you get this amount of money. Kill fees aren't covered in every contract, but you do want your contract to say what happens to your work if the project never goes forward. For instance, if it is pay upon acceptance, when is it considered accepted? And until that moment, can you tell them, you know what, I changed my mind, you can't have those words. If it's pay upon publication, is there a deadline that they have to publish it by? And if not, do you get the words back at the end of that period? When do the rights transfer to you? Work for hire can make that tricky, but you just want a contract to cover what happens if you fulfill your end and the publisher never fulfills their end. Now, if their end is pay upon acceptance and acceptance is within 30 days of the deadline or rejection, then a kill fee isn't necessary. You'll know at that time either they rejected it, in which case the contract says that they're not taking those words, or they pay you, in which case they have fulfilled their end, whether they published it or not, because you got your money. For things like profit sharing and royalties, it can be even more important that you know, hey, what happens if this goes out of print? And be aware that there is a difference between electronic print and print. So if you say, kept in print or kept in publication, those could potentially have different legal meanings. And I am not a lawyer, and nothing I say tonight is legal advice. But just look at whether or not your contract, whether you're submitting one for someone else to sign or you're signing one for work that you're doing for them, just look and see whether it covers those issues. I've only had a kill fee come up once in my career, and that was for D20 Spectaculars, which was a story I was in the middle of when we got shut down last week by bad internet. So D20 Spectaculars is a book that was going to be done by Wizards of the Coast as a supplement for D20 Modern. And I was one of the two announced writers for that, the other being Mike Merles, and I got paid a third of my fee in advance. And that was always rare. It's even rarer now than it was at the time. And I was doing my work, and there were various problems that were entirely outside my control that was causing me to not be able to get all of my work done because there are things that were supposed to be taken care of or sent to me or arranged for that weren't happening. And before the final deadline came along, as I told them, hey, these things aren't going along, Wizards of the Coast came back and said, look, we're not going to do this book. We're canceling it. And I had a freelance contact, a handler at that end, and she said, we don't want you to be cheated out of this work. You've done this work. What do we owe you? How much of this work have you done? As it happens, I'd done about a third of the total word count, and I'd gotten a third of my payment in advance. So I told them, I've done about as much work as you paid me for. I would be okay with just saying, I get to keep the advance. What work I did is yours, even though I don't plan to do anything with it, and we call it even. And they agreed. And there was a clause that covered that being an option, though I obviously do not remember the details since that was more than a decade ago, in the contract. So we knew the basis upon which we were doing this. I've had kill fees get negotiated after the fact in some cases, including things like there are articles I wrote for, I believe, Campaign magazine during the boom of the D20 cycle that were published, but I never got paid for. And since they basically were going bankrupt, or at the very least had stopped publishing and had money problems, I said, look, if you guys will give me a certain amount of free product that you've got apparently sitting around and give me the rights back to my work, I will consider this contract fulfilled. So we wrote a second contract to indicate that the terms of the first contract were considered fulfilled under these terms. So that's another thing to keep in mind. While you can't change a contract unilaterally once you all have signed it, that's the whole point of a contract. If something comes up that a contract doesn't cover, or if one side is not able to fulfill their obligations under a contract, you certainly can go to them and say, look, I propose we solve this problem this way, and you can write an addendum. So if you signed a contract with someone and they said, hey, we'll give you $20 for your work, and then they make $2 million, you shouldn't go to them and say, hey, I want more money just because you made more money. You fulfilled your end, they fulfilled their end. But on the other hand, if you say, hey, I'm going to do this work, and they say, okay, it'll be printed in 3 languages, and then they come along and they say, hey, someone wants to print it in a 4th language, you can make a new deal to cover that. You're not bound to not change things, as long as, again, both sides have a meeting of minds. Not a lawyer, not legal advice. So that is the entirety of the kill fee story that I was covering last week. I also wanted to cover NDAs, which sometimes come with a contract and sometimes they're handled separately. NDA stands for non-disclosure agreement. A lot of bigger companies have NDAs for freelancers that they say, anytime we give you any information or material or data or hints or advice as part of you doing a project for us, this NDA covers you for that. So you don't have to do an NDA for every single different project, although sometimes there are new projects and the legal department may say, hey, we want a new NDA. This isn't the sort of thing we covered. And basically it says, this information we give you, you will not disclose it to anyone, non-disclosure agreement. If we are asking you to write new feats for a new game we're writing, a new D20 setting game, you won't tell anyone about that. You won't release information about it. You won't put archives of all of this up online unless we tell you you can. And that includes not announcing that you're working on a project, not talking about the details, not sharing copies of PDFs with your friends. Generally speaking, my risk-averse nature means I say, if you've got an NDA, tell nobody that is not already know about it and make sure they know about it before you discuss it. This has led occasionally to unusual situations where I and another freelancer who both regularly work for someone may dance in a circle for a little bit trying to figure out, are they working on this project? Do I know? When you're in that circumstance, it is best to just go to your contact at the company, whoever that is, be that an editor or a developer or a producer, and say, is this a person that already knows? Can I discuss this with them? It's not at all unusual if people want to bring multiple freelancers together or even have a place online, Basecamp or a Google Doc or something where you all can discuss those things. But just check that with the people that have you sign your NDA. NDAs are serious stuff, and they are an important part of the industry because companies need to be able to trust you with the information you need to do the job without you turning around and making it difficult for the company to then make money by selling the thing. The company has people that decide when is it going to be announced, what are we going to preview, what are we going to talk about. Sometimes those things are very important. Like if you've got a big project, those previews may be promised to specific people as exclusives. Pardon me. So you might think, hey, it's not a big deal for me to say, hey, for the new Halfling Warbaker supplement, I've decided to do an explosive muffins feat. Except if the publisher of that has promised some magazine, you're going to have the exclusive on some feats we're previewing. You have now broken that exclusive, and that can cause trouble. Not to mention that these just aren't your secrets to decide when to go out. So if you are under an NDA, take it very, very seriously. If you think there are places where exceptions reasonably should be made, talk to your contact at the company and abide by what they say. If you're not under an NDA, I generally speaking, for industry materials, say consider yourself under an NDA, just as an act of professionalism. I'm not sure that counts as an industry standard, and then I don't know that everyone does that, but I at least, if you've told me something and I don't explicitly know that that information is for general dissemination, I don't. I treat that all as being under an NDA. And I've got a lot of companies that have a lot of NDAs with my name on them. So that's just safe on my part. But even if I was working with a brand new company that never got it from me, it's just bad professionalism and not a good career move to start blabbing other people's secrets. We talked a little bit last week about feedback and development, that when you turn words over, they are going to be different when they're published, or at least they might be, and there are all sorts of reasons for that. We've got a link up at the top to that show so that you can show people by that. Christopher Cruz says, so by default, act if you're under an NDA. Yes, I would certainly say do that by default. So I was talking about, changes. Unfortunately, feedback is not an industry standard. It is not universal. It's not as common as it should be. It is, however, almost universal that you can learn something by looking at the published version of your work as opposed to what you turned over. I, early in my career especially, would sometimes have my turnover and like a magazine article and go line by line to see what has been changed. That's a great way to discover if you've got weird word choices or if they have reworded a rule that makes it clearer. You can sometimes have things like, this does 1d4 plus 1 hit point per level. And then you're like, well, is that 1d4 and then at each level plus 1? Or is that 1d4 plus 1 at each level? If I'm third level, is that 3d4 plus 3? Or is that 1d4 plus 3? And there are ways that you can reword that. So you can say 1d4 damage, comma, plus 1 hit point of damage per level. That becomes clear. And those are the sorts of little tricks and tips I have picked up by looking at what developers and editors have done that. Adam Daigle, who's one of my peers, absolutely in the industry, and my I guess not currently my boss, but my boss's peer. But anyway, a manager at Paizo who's worked at Paizo longer than I did, say he did the same thing for years, checking what he turned over. And if Adam says that there's something he did for a long time and helped with his career, you should totally pay attention to that. Oh, hi, Jessica. Jessica Price just joined. So I think studying your turnovers can be useful. Just keep in mind that some things may have been changed for reasons other than it wasn't good enough. And I covered that a little last week, that like if you turned over 12 fighter feats and you end up seeing 6 fighter feats and 6 magus feats, that may just be a case where that product needed more magus feats. Pitching versus assigning tasks. A lot of people seem to assume that the way most freelance works in this industry is you have a project, you're excited by it, you go to a company and you pitch that project. And you say, hey, I want to write in a 12-part adventure path set in a giant pyramid that's sinking into a swamp and is periodically struck by lightning. And then they're excited or not, and then if they're excited, you write the whole thing, hand it over to them, and they publish it just the way you wrote it. Every part of that is wrong. The way most freelance works in this industry is that a company that has writing that they need to be done have a project, and they take that project to freelancers. and they say, we have selected you as a person that we are offering this freelance to. And if that freelancer isn't free for whatever reason, they'll go on to another person. You can pitch things to companies, but you should look and see if they've got some sort of website or policy on pitching. Like Paizo basically doesn't take external pitches. So if you want to work for Paizo, right, you want to already have some game industry credits, and you want to contact the various developers and say, I'm interested in working for you, and maybe you ping them once every 90 days if they don't get back to you. But for the most part, once you've pitched to them that you'd like to work for them, they'll tell you what's available. Smaller companies such as Rogue Genius, you might well have different cases where you can say, hey, I want to write a 3,000-word book on halfling war makers. We might go, that sounds cool, tell us more about it. In general, however, there are very few ideas where the idea is so unique and valuable that it itself has a lot of the success of a product built into it. I'm not saying it never happens, but it is unusual. Execution is much more important. So when you pitch stuff to me, I still want to know what evidence is that you can do it right. And if it's my company, I still want to know that I'm free to develop it, to edit it. Those are things that we can cover in the contract. Michael Toomey says, when I got hired to map for Bradley Games for Call of Duty Advanced Warfare Strategy Guide, they were supposed to send me an NDA, but forgot, and I worked at Activision Video Game Studios for 8 days under a keep your damn mouth shut policy. I was asked about my NDA one day with the other freelancers on that job and said, oh God, you were supposed to. I just treated it as if I was under NDA. Yeah, and that is absolutely the way to do that, because people forget, and you don't want entire game lines being canceled over that. Luis Loza is another Paizo person and an expert in the industry. Don't be afraid to ask your contact for feedback when you're looking for it. Personally, I'll do my best to get it to you when asked. Yeah, since I'm talking about contacting people, feedback doesn't flow out much in this industry, and even asking for it may not get it to you. We aren't all as conscientious about that as Luis, but there's nothing wrong with asking. No one should react badly if you say, hey, do you have any feedback for this? Are there ways I can do better for you? Are there things that changed? I'm trying to be better about feedback to my freelancers, but it can still be a struggle. And of course, I haven't dealt with. I've been doing a lot of stuff other than development work at Paizo recently, so I haven't done as much of it. Joshua Hennington, I can concur. I generally only pitch to third-party publishers, and only if it's relevant to their current product lines. That's a good way to handle it. So just be aware. I mean, just because you want to write an adventure doesn't mean that a publisher wants to publish that adventure. A lot of companies exist because the people that spent the money on those companies are interested in publishing the things that interest them, and they have those ideas, and they're paying people to make their ideas happen. So they may well not need your ideas. For a lot of people, that's a lot like going to a book writer or a movie script writer and saying, I have an idea, how about I sell it to you? And you do the hard work of writing the script or the book. Most writers don't need that idea. And if they do need an idea, there are people with long, successful track records they can go to and say, hey, I need some ideas. But it is a little different in that, especially at the lower third-party level, especially if you've got a manuscript or even the start of a manuscript, frequently you can get smaller people to look at it and see if they're interested in doing it. Style guides. Style guides are not necessarily an industry standard. They are for some people, they aren't for others. I'm talking here about style guides, writing guides, something that says this is how we handle they as a single person pronoun, dangling participles, lists, alphabetization. The English language has a lot of different ways you can do things, and there are a lot of style guides that will help tell you which ways are considered appropriate by the people that use that style guide. In my experience, the most common style guides in the industry that are starting points are Strunk and White, the Chicago Manual of Style, and the MLA. These are not things, in my experience, that you need to read and memorize. They are more like encyclopedias of word use. So if you've got a question, like if I say there are 12 people in Congress, am I then, when I refer back to that, Congress is a singular, but people are a plural, so do I say they are or it is if I talk about Congress and then doing something later? Some of that stuff you can look up in these books. Same with lists, same with credits, doing references, proper attribution, that sort of stuff. I personally think every writer should have these things on hand. And then if a company tells you that they use one of those, you know where you can go to. If they don't tell you, there's nothing wrong with asking, hey, do you all have a writing style, a style guide that you use? Do you use Strunk and White? Do you use Chicago Manual of Style? On top of that, a lot of companies and a lot of game lines have house styles where they do things like we italicize anything that's magical. So if it's a spell or a magic item, we italicize that so that the GM knows when you cast Detect Magic what gets detected. That's not going to be in the MLA, but it might be in an individual style guide of an individual company. Rogue Genius Games has a style guide we use for Pathfinder, which I'm going to see if I can find the link for, which has things like in what order do you put information for prerequisites in a feat, right? Which it seems like it's just random or alphabetical, but there is in fact a very specific order that stuff gets done in, at least for us. And I know a lot of other companies use our style guides because we bothered to write one. Guide for Pathfinder for RGG. And that is now in the comments. I would ask about style guides, but even if they say they don't have one or don't have a preference or don't have anything to give you, I would pick a style guide and write within it so that you have internal consistency. Because consistency is one way to have clarity in your writing. It is not the only way, and consistency does not always produce clarity, but it's a great place to start, and I just like having something to fall back on to answer those questions. Richard T. Balsey says, talking about pitches and such, I've landed a couple of projects by writing proposals that companies asked for, but most of it has been people saying they need writers, like Owen stated, or by asking if I could help someone I worked for before. Borrowed language, style guide, great. So that pretty much handles style guides. Oh, I also want to mention Writing with Style, which is a book Ray Valise wrote, which we, Rogue Genius Games, publish. It is an editor's advice for RPG writers. I personally consider it as close to sort of a RPG technical writing 101 book. It's got a lot of great information in it. One of the reasons we published it is that I wanted to make him finish writing it so that I could read it, and telling him I'd publish it was one way to do that. I know there are people who use that for adventure writing courses and stuff as a class book. Alan Hoffman says, each company I've worked for had a guide or how to write, how to order, what kind of fonts, what format they want. It actually makes the writing easier for you. Yeah, and fonts and formats is another thing. Some people, Paizo included, for instance, like stuff to come in using specific styles in Word. So, for instance, there's one style that's an H1 for headers, one for an H2, one's for an H3. At my website, owencstevens.com, I have a tag for writing basics. I'm going to see if I can put that link in. And I talk about things like headers and such. But the whole point is that these things force you to think about organizing your information the way Paizo likes it organized, so that when Paizo then sends it to Layout, Layout has the information that they need to make sure it looks correct. Because again, we have that consistency thing, right? If we have a way that we put headers, it helps you know, oh, this information, which is in a smaller header, is a subset of this information in the bigger header. And having that be consistent over books and over a book line is helpful. So I've done several writing basics, and these aren't all industry standards, so I'm tooting my own horn just a little bit by posting this up here. But again, I bothered to write these, so I might as well post them. And that's now in the comments. So that is the majority of the stuff that I had ready. There is something else I should at least briefly mention. And those are things where I don't feel like there is a standard. And in many cases, that's unfortunate. It can lead to problems because sometimes people think there is a standard and there isn't one. How to comport yourself in public as a freelancer and an employee, I don't really know that there's something I would call an industry standard. There are people in this industry that feel like if I'm on contract or if I am hourly or I am salaried, that when I am doing that job, then I need to worry about what the company's opinion of what I say, what I think, how I comport myself, what I wear. Those things matter. And then the rest of the time, it doesn't, and they should have no feedback on it. I am sympathetic to that position, but not all companies feel that way. And I'm not trying to say that that is right or reasonable either way. I've actually discussed this a little bit again on my blog. But you just need to know that, for example, if you're a freelancer, the posts you make in a forum about gaming may well influence whether that company wants to work with you again or not. If you are an employee and you are stating even political beliefs that have nothing to do with gaming, that are different from what your company thinks, that and what they want to espouse, or if you get into an argument with a customer, even if that customer is being a dick, you may well suffer consequences for that, regardless of whether that's fair or not. There are ways to try to insulate yourself some from these things. Link to adventure writing course. Gosh, I know there is at least one, but I don't know if I have a link to it because they told me they were doing. I'm going to feel bad because I was not. Yeah, I'm not finding it. There are absolutely people that do it, but unfortunately, I'm not coming up with what I'm thinking of off the top of my head, and I don't want to make everyone wait while this is the drawback to not having LJ. I don't want to make everyone wait while I look for it. So, hey, folks, if you know a good adventure writing course, ping me. Maybe we'll do a review of some or put it in the thread. So, sorry, David Morris, not information I've got at my fingertips. As far as comporting yourself in public, there are things you can do to try and be on the same page as the people that you are working with, right? If you're an employee, it is perfectly reasonable to say, what is the company policy for my Facebook posts, my Twitter feed, all social media, my interaction with people in a meet space environment? And I mean, there's not like there's any legal requirement for them to have a policy, but if there is one, you at least now have that as a guideline. And if they feel you're doing something you shouldn't be and you're within the policy, you now have something to point to and say, hey, look, this is supposed to be the policy. Why do you consider me to be out of completion with that? Mike Mailer said, AshleyWarrenWrites.com RPG Writer Workshop, free and paid version. So that's a link that he put out there. What kind of demand is there for layout folks across the industry, asked Steve Townsend. I mean, layout has to happen. There's a layout department that is many people large. I think it's about the same size as the editing department at Paizo. Rogue Genius has a regular layout person we use, which happens to be my wife, who also happens to be one of the owners of the company. But she also does freelance layout for numerous other companies. So not everything can be done by the company owner, right? Smaller companies frequently, the owner or the multiple owners or the art director or whatever, try to do as much as possible to save money, but this stuff has to get laid out. So I would say demand is present. I don't know that it's large, but I don't know anyone with a history of layout who has not successfully been able to get at least supplementary income once they are known for doing layout in the industry. Getting that first one can be tricky, but so that's been about half an hour, which is about what I'm normally trying to do on these. And I've covered all the topics that I meant to get to last week but didn't. So if anyone has anything specific they want to ask, we can have you drop it in the comments. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. So I will ramble on for just a little bit longer. I appreciate you all putting up with me having to type and look down at my computer and do all the stuff that normally LJ would do. And I mean, honestly, this show is just better when LJ's on. That just wasn't an option today. So I decided to go ahead and brave it on my own. So since I don't see any comments from anyone wanting to follow up on anything, I will remind you that I've got a YouTube, which I suppose I should link. I've got a YouTube page that eventually all these go up to, as well as I've got stories I do there and jokes and all sorts of stuff. So let me see if I can find that link, and you all will have more time to ask me a question if you care to. Yeah, here we go. This is my YouTube channel, and all my videos are up there. And again, if you like any of those are things that that are supported through my Patreon. Joshua Henson says it's a pleasure to receive this advice. Thank you very much. Dave Townsend, thanks, Owen. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. Alan Hoffman, what advice do you have for all freelancers who've already published but have hit a dry spot because of the PF2 announcement? Okay, so for those of you that don't know, there's a pretty big freelance pool of people who work for on Pathfinder products for Paizo and for third-party publishers, and sometimes they just write it for themselves. And Paizo has announced that there is going to be a second edition. There's a playtest going at the moment. You can go to paizo.com and see the links for the playtest material and give your feedback on it. But as a result, a lot of third-party publishers and Paizo aren't publishing as much material, so there isn't as much need for freelancers for writing for first edition Pathfinder right now. First of all, I would say look at people that are still, to answer your question, what would I advise for those people? Look at the people that are still publishing Pathfinder material on a fairly regular basis and ask them, hey, are you all still supporting it now? Do you plan to support it in the future? do you need freelancers I would like to write for you? Because there are people still doing it. If you go to drivethrough.com and look at their Pathfinder and D20 compatible line, there are a ton of people that are still writing for companies releasing content for that edition of the game. And there are people that do compatible material for first and second edition and things that, have been out of print since the 80s. So there will still be some market for that. If you want to be a person that writes for that market, the time to try and get known as the person that's still doing first edition Pathfinder work is now. I would also recommend that you consider boning up enough on Starfinder that you can do Starfinder freelance. There are a number of companies that do Starfinder. Rogue Genius is on that list. Everyman Games. I've got stuff that I'm supposed to be developing for Right Publishing for Starfinder. Legendary, bunches of people are doing it. And that game just came out a little over a year ago. There certainly is no announcement of a second edition for that that has been released. And just practically speaking, I wouldn't expect one, although I'm there speaking as my freelancer hat rather than as any inside knowledge hat. And the games there are differences. There are important differences, but a lot of people have discussed those publicly. And you can look at what has been done and try and figure out what is available for that. There are other D20 games out there. 13th Age, and for that matter, 5th edition is something that you can train yourself to work into, and you can maybe even release things on the DM's Guild. But in general, I would say it's time to branch out from 1st edition if you want to be a regular RPG freelancer, right? When I got my full-time freelance, I was working in 2nd edition at first in the 90s. And that was almost all magazine work. And then I did a little tiny amount of work for Champions, which was literally never published. And then 3rd edition came along. And I thought, I can't learn a whole new game, but I had the opportunity to play test 3rd edition. So I said, okay, I'll play test it. I'll see if I like it. I'll see if I can write for it. And I was actually writing Dragon articles for it before the game was even out. Again, one of which was never published, although, I guess I got 2 kill fees because I got paid for that too, although that was 100% of what I was supposed to get paid for it. But then 3.5 came along, and I was then writing for Star Wars, and 4th edition came along, and Pathfinder came along. I've been in that place where I was writing for Star Wars Saga Edition, Pathfinder, and 4th edition D&D at the same time, sometimes in the same week. And those are 3 games that are just similar enough to make it very difficult to remember, are there opportunity attacks, or is it attacks of opportunity, and regardless, does it happen when I stand or not? So I would have one screen that I was writing and another screen that I'd have open with the rules I needed. Branch out. I think that is a way to do things. Also, if you want to get experimental and do your own stuff, maybe self-publish or approach a small company and say, I have an idea for something that's totally new, right? I have planar support. Richard T. Balsey says, there are avenues of exploration that haven't been exhausted yet because of books yet to come, such as the planar book. There's still stuff that you can do. You can publish it yourself, or you can find other people to publish it. So there you go. That's my rambling answer. Mike Mailer asks, has Seattle stopped trying to choke you to death? Right at the moment, the air quality is solidly in the middle of good. That has been true for a couple days, and it's supposed to rain over the following week. And I keep being told it's rain. I have not actually seen the rain. I'm not near a window where I work during the day at the office. But rain will help keep it down. There aren't as many fires surrounding us on all sides. So it's good now. It was good yesterday. It looks like it'll be good tomorrow. And my hope is that as the fire season winds down and the rain season winds up, we'll have clean air more often. Okay. Tim Nightingale just joined, so I feel terrible that I'm about to close this up. But hi, Tim. Good to see you. And I hope you join us next week for another episode of The Aftergame.